Pre-COVID, Australia's emissions were down 13% on 2005 levels, the baseline year for the Paris Agreement targets. Canada's emissions over that timeframe haven't fallen, while New Zealand's have only fallen 1% versus our 13%, and New Zealand's are projected to increase sharply in future years on their own projections. But we've also learned from the last decade, particularly with respect to unintended consequences and the need to maintain balance in our energy system. The early retirement of Hazlewood in Victoria caused a major shock in our electricity market, a shock that we can't repeat. And why was it a shock? Because the analysis was flawed. And I still hear much of that analysis today. For decades, our energy system was getting two services for free. And other than hardcore engineers, we didn't think much about it. We received frequency control, so critical to grid stability, for free. We had an oversupply of big thermal generators, and it was easy to make sure that the grid was stable. And second, we received energy storage for free. So when we compared the cost of generation between wind and solar and traditional generators, we forgot about the services we were getting for free. Coal had built-in storage. It was a stockpile next to the generator. Whereas storage and backup are not automatically part of a solar and wind farm. We effectively compared a block of land with a house and land deal and assumed they were the same. Now that's just the reality of the modern grid. It's neither good nor bad. But there was a clear failure. We haven't had a dispatchable generator built in New South Wales for over 10 years. And that's why we've established the $1 billion Grid Reliability Fund alongside the Retailer Reliability Obligation to ensure that Australia's world-leading deployment of renewables is integrated and backed up. We saw the problem and we're stepping in to address it in a practical way. So why is this important for the tech roadmap? The roadmap is about managing the future without ignoring the lessons of the past. We were successful in meeting and beating our targets because we had lots of horses in the race. But there were challenges, and those included underestimating the pace of change and particularly the unintended consequences of those changes. And if we get this wrong, if we suppress the economy to achieve our emissions reduction goals, then we've gone down the wrong path. The timely development and application of technologies can lower prices for energy, achieve our goals and protect our way of life, if we learn the lessons from the past. Now, throughout history, we've seen some of the best technology advancements made through a combination of private and public sectors. The public sector has been making interventions and investments in research and development for as long as there has been a public sector. This isn't new. History tells us that we get the best results when the public sector supports R&D, particularly at the high-risk early stages, and then the private sector drives deployment, commercialisation and scale. The roadmap also recognises that our investments should drive towards our natural advantages here in Australia, such as our abundant natural resources. Put simply, we should pursue opportunities that play to Australia's strengths, recognising that we can play a global leadership role where we have real advantage. I've been greatly heartened by the engagement we've received in the development of this work. My reference panel received over 500 submissions. Alan, Drew, Shamara, Grant, Alison, Ben and Joe, some of whom are here today, some of whom I know couldn't be here because of restrictions, have met regularly on the development of this roadmap. Over 400 people and 150 businesses, researchers and peak bodies attended events during the roadmap's development. This engagement has been absolutely critical to the development. And this is why the government has decided to formalise our ongoing advisory council, chaired by Dr Alan Finkel. The Ministerial Reference Panel will be converted into an enduring institution, the Technology Investment Advisory Council, to advise on future low emissions technology statements, like the one today. Now, joining the council will be the chairs of ARENA, CFC and the Clean Energy Regulator. The council will be tasked with annually reviewing technologies in the roadmap and making recommendations on their place within the framework. Now, our framework has 4 technology categories, each with different opportunities and initiatives attached to them. They are priority low emissions technologies, emerging and enabling technologies, watching brief technologies, and mature technologies. Priority technologies are those expected to have transformational impacts here and globally that are not yet mature. These technologies have high abatement and economic potential in areas of comparative advantage for Australia. They're priorities where government investments can make a difference in reducing costs and improving technology readiness. Technologies where we as a government will not only prioritise our investments, but where we'll streamline regulation and legislation to encourage investment. Investors will have confidence that identified priority technologies are of long-term strategic importance to the government. Those identified in the first statement are clean hydrogen, electricity from storage and firming, for firming, low carbon steel and aluminium, carbon capture and storage, and soil carbon. This statement sets economic stretch goals for each of these technologies, stretch goals which are competitive with higher emitting alternatives. Now, we've already announced the first of these goals, hydrogen production under $2 per kilogram, H2 under 2. And today we announce 4 new stretch goals. Long duration energy storage dispatched at under $100 a megawatt hour, which would enable firmed wind and solar to be delivered at prices around or below today's average wholesale price. CO2 compression, transport and storage at under $20 a tonne. Low emission steel production at under $900 a tonne, and aluminium under $2,700 a tonne. And fourth, soil carbon measurement for less than $3 per hectare per year. We know what we're aiming for, and we know why. Getting these technologies right will strengthen our economy and create jobs, but they will significantly reduce global emissions across sectors across the world that emit 45 billion tonnes annually. Australia alone will avoid 250 million tonnes of emissions through these technologies if we reach the stretch goals by 2040. Having these goals will enable us to measure our progress through the future. Over the last decade, there's been enormous focus on electricity, which makes up only 32% of our total emissions. These technologies we've outlined today will broaden the focus to include the other 68% of emissions outside of the grid, in industry, manufacturing, agriculture and transport.